Welcome back to Roots and Relevance. This is the episode we've probably built up way too much. Saying chapter 6 is going to be it. So before we jump in, though, I'm curious. At least 3 out of the 4 of us are really into movies. Jonathan, I'm not sure if you
not
are
into movies. Not
I didn't
anymore.
think so.
Used to be. But
so this question might be harder for you. I'm curious, like, what movie have you seen that had the biggest twist where you're like, I did not see that coming? Bonus points if it's a reversal.
There's a movie called Primal Fear.
He is lying right now. Like, no, there is a movie that he totally cheated.
Okay, can I give you something? So
Sure.
it's kind of like a movie, but it's actually a book. But I listened to it, so it's kind of like a movie without the video. But there's a book called 3. I can't remember the name of the author, but he wrote Ted Decker, Red, Black, and White. But he wrote this thing called 3, and at the end, man, it will. Have you read it? 3.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. It's been a long time. Yeah.
I can't look at windows today at nighttime without seeing the reflection. Anyway,
he's a good writer. Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Is that scarier than Bloody Mary in the mirror looking back at you?
Blair Witch.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that for tonight when I walk through the house at night.
Have Rachel look in the mirror or window first before you see it.
I'll do that.
Wally, what about you? What's your...
Oh, my goodness. Good night.
So I just took from you.
Yes, you did. Thank you. I think Knives Out was a good... Oh, was that yours?
Thank you.
I'm just going
Knives Out 2?
Knives Out 2 was not nearly as good as the first one.
Moana, maybe?
The second one?
Did you just say marijuana?
I wasn't expecting the ending of the second one.
I said Moana, not marijuana.
Moana.
Good gravy. I don't know. Jonathan took mine.
And then you took Riley's. I see how that works.
You know, here's the thing. A lot of shows and TV movies and things like that are so predictable. You know where it's going.
You follow the same tropes and the same plot lines.
Yeah, and so it's so predictable. So when you actually have a movie that sort of changes your expectation, you know, subverts what you're expecting to happen, it doesn't, it should stick out. But, you know, both of mine were taken. So.
Well, I imagine that's how people felt when, what's the second Star Wars movie I've released? Can't think of it. Empire Strikes Back. At the end of Empire Strikes Back, like, I never experienced that because I watched them in chronological order. But I can imagine the theater was just
failed you as a father.
I think we should have gone machete order, but that's
yes, we have.
beside the point. But just the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's dad, I feel like that's a 40-year-old spoiler at this point. Like it's not.
Yeah. So
if you haven't seen that,
I am your father.
So true story, mine, and it is really obvious, right? But The Sixth Sense is one where, you know, you think you're staring at a person. No, Riley,
Nope.
that's actually an older movie worth going back and watching. True story. My co-pastor in New Jersey, this would have been like 15, 16 years ago, used that in an illustration and told like the plot twist. And like a third of like the congregation was like, what? Like, I can't believe that. And he was like, you know what? If you haven't seen it at this point, that's on you. And I'm like, that's kind of how I feel at this point.
Are pastors now required to say spoiler alert if they use these kind of movie metaphors?
I feel like they should.
Illustrations?
Yeah. The people in the congregation just plug in their ears and going, la, la, la.
So he started getting a reputation because he said this big one on something like a finale of a big TV show. I think it was Downtown Abbey. It had just happened, and he spoiled like the last episode. Our whole he got
brutal.
Some hate email.
Well, we did not spoil any Downton Abbey for Riley, and she got mad at us because we didn't let her know that what was going to happen at the end of season 3.
Okay. So
and I know nothing about I'm not saying anything about it.
Did I stop watching soon after that? Yes, I did.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, we'll bring that up because clearly chapter 6 is that I see dead people moment, right? Of Sixth Sense. That Riley will not get that, but
nope.
Yeah.
I need to see it, but
yeah. But now that we've ruined it for you, but it chapter 6 is a total like, you know, reversal and kind of a mic drop moment as we're going to see. So yeah, let's just jump right in. We may or may not get done today with chapter 6, but let's see what we can do. Jonathan, you want to kick us off with verses 1 through 3?
That night, sleep escaped the king, so he ordered the book recording daily events to be brought and read to the king. They found the written report of how Mordecai had informed on Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance when they planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. The king inquired what honor and special recognition had been given to Mordecai for this act. The king's personal attendants replied, "Nothing has been done for him."
It's a good setup.
Thank you.
What stands out to you here, other than Big Tana and Teresh?
Why wasn't the king able to sleep? What has just happened in the story?
Well, we spoke last week of Esther's horrible deception of lying and being unrighteous about having an affair with Haman.
That's some pretty biased language right there.
That's a little bit, didn't it?
I think that I had not heard that until David Foreman had mentioned it, but it totally fits with what's happening here of like not being able to sleep and like what is going on.
Is
right
my
now?
wife having an affair?
Yeah.
Like, do I need to be worried? Am I gonna have to find a new wife again? Like, I don't want to do that.
He's not trusting Haman anymore either, I'm sure, if that thought is in his head. So I think that's what makes it the most sense. And then this incredible coincidence.
He was like, I need a bedtime story. You guys gotta get me to sleep somehow.
And that'll do it. Reading Chronicles, not, just kind of boring records, I can imagine that would put anybody to sleep. But it's an amazing coincidence, right? Like that he just happened to have, these eunuchs that were basically who had guarded the entrance when they planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. Is that how we say it now?
I don't know.
I mean, you just think about all these coincidences that we see within this story. We see this Haman. I mean, we see Mordecai just being at the right place at the right time to hear this plot and tells it. We see Esther, all the things that happened to Esther. We even see in chapter 1 Vashti's unwillingness to come to the king, and all these seemingly unconnected circumstantial episodes within the story actually lead into where we are now.
I think it's interesting that the language for when they read this passage about Mordecai is in verse 2. It starts, "It was found written." Not that then they read the passage of Mordecai saving the king's life. No, they discovered it. They were like, oh, that did happen. Like it hadn't even entered their minds. And so for God to bring this up in this time, in this place, is instrumental to the rest of the story.
Just happened to open up in the part of the skull where it just happened to have mentioned Mordecai.
100%. And then, we talked a lot about pride last week, and verse 3 is so it's funny in that sense, right? What honor and special recognition have been given to Mordecai? Like, how can I exalt Mordecai the Jew which is like literally what he's going to be called.
And can't you see the turn of the story now?
Totally.
Right? Haman was going to kill and to do away with Mordecai, but now we're starting to see the story turn right here. We see this pivot point.
The humble will be exalted. The exalted will be humbled.
But don't let Jonathan know that Mordecai was humble. He does think is unrighteous.
Sinful in it, yeah. All right, Riley, you want to, next section, starting at chapter 4, we'll do verses 4 through 6.
So the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, "Behold, Haman is standing in the court." And the king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in, and the king said to him, "What is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor?" And Haman said to himself, "Who would the king desire to honor more than me?"
This is, Jonathan, what would our friend Adele Berlin say about this little section?
I read it early on. I don't remember.
Well, you brought it up a lot about how she looks at the whole thing as like, I think the word, was it farce?
Oh, actually, I just,
okay.
Levinson and Adele, but Levinson actually says this about that statement. He says, the timing talking about the reading of the history, the timing could not be more perfect. The ground is thus laid for the mini drama of verses 10 through 11, which is a foretaste in a comical or even farcical mode of denouement of this entire intensely serious tale. So again, he's doubling down on this. This is really a comedy and farce. And then the Jews listening to the story for the 100th time would be going, "Yay, yay! This is when Haman's going to die." Blah blah blah. So I do think it's a lot of literary stuff going on here for sure. But I think it's important. You see what in verse 3 what he says. So the king inquired what honor, number 1, and special recognition 2 have been given to Mordecai. 3. He goes out there and gets Haman because Haman's coming to put him on his stake. And what does King whatever actually say to him? He says, "Have him enter," the king ordered. Haman entered, I'm on verse 6. And the king asked, "What should be done for the man the king wants to honor. And I think the fun part is, could Haman have any more special recognition or any more promotion? And the answer is no. He was the highest he could get. And so it's almost like this trick, just like Esther was doing. The reader is actually, the reader is not saying the king was being deceitful, but what is coming out is creating this drama of he didn't give Haman the full story, not naming the man, and also not naming that he was going to give him a promotion. It was just honor to a certain man.
So you think the king knew what he was doing
no,
there?
I don't think so. No. I think that's what the narrator.
Let's not give him that much credit.
No. I think the narrator's having fun with this, or the author of the story. I think he's having fun of saying, we know what was in the king's mind, but this is what came out, and this is what's going to create the climax or the center of the chiasm here. This is what's going to bring Mordecai straight honor, ultimately Haman's death.
And I think it very interesting in verse number 3, we see the king wanting to honor Mordecai. And in verse 4, we see the mirror image of Haman wanting to kill Mordecai on the gallows. So here we're actually seeing this flip now, right here in 3 and 4. We're seeing that flip in Mordecai, how he's going to be honored by the king, and what's going to happen to Haman now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, also talking about timing, if we look in the last chapter, Haman's wife was like, hey, just wait around till morning, we'll sleep on it, and then you'll go and you'll take care of all this, and you'll get Mordecai killed tomorrow. Haman can't even wait till the morning. He's just in the middle of the night in the king's palace like, hey, I need you to come kill this guy for me, please.
He's lost all kind of rational thought, hadn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He is driven by his emotions right now.
Verse 6, the last part, I think, when Haman's like, "Who would the king desire to honor more than me?"
And what
Haman thought to himself. Yeah.
The actual phrase is, he said in his heart. And Foreman brings out something that the rabbis have brought out. He says, when you're inside your heart, when you're acting on the inside of your heart, your emotions are ruling, versus you ruling your emotions.
Which we talked a lot about in the fall in Genesis. Remember, that was a long time ago. But remember, we talked about the difference in accepting the wisdom from God versus just whatever the heart desires. I grab, and I take, right? It's that.
So he now is no longer rational. He is acting out of soul desire and impulse, that he cannot not do these things.
And think about that. I know he's very, very powerful, but if the king is having trouble sleeping, that means it's late at night and he's in the court. I love how Foreman says, what's he going to do? Throw little pebbles and rocks at the window and wake him up? And how would that have gone if he was asleep and, was woken up? But he has no controlling, to your point. He's just going based off his impulses.
What would have happened if Haman wasn't in the court? Who would the king have brought in to help him process this? But it wasn't, right? So, you can see it as coincidence. You can see it as God's sovereignty and providence being played out, that Haman was the person at the court at the right time for everything wrong for Haman that's going to happen. Right?
The timing had to be perfect, and it was. Anything else in that section, or the first two sections put together?
Where did we get through?
We are through,
6.
I'm going to do 7 through 9.
Okay, yeah.
Haman told the king, for the man the king wants to honor. This is pure comedy, right? Have them bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn, and a horse the king himself has ridden, which has a royal crown on its head. Put the garment and the horse under the charge of one of the king's most noble officials. Have them clothe the man the king wants to honor. Parade him on the horse through the city square, and call out before him, this is what is done for the man the king wants to honor. Pure gold.
So we're having fun with this Joseph. And by the way, in retrospect, I wish I had done more study. It's almost like we should have gone through the story of Joseph before we went through the story of Esther, because I think it would have been very illuminating for me. But you see this same.
And we go back and do Joseph.
Yeah, it would be a pretty cool thing to do. But if you look at 41:30 of Genesis 37, chapter 41:37, it is when Joseph has determined what the dream of Pharaoh was, and he gets exalted, and he says that he is going to give him his ring, that he's going to dress him in fine linens, and then he's going to be able to ride in the second chariot, the one underneath Pharaoh. The servants are out before him saying, make way, here comes, Joseph. So it's a throwback to Joseph, but there's a stark difference. So Raleigh, I'm going to do a Wally thing. So what's the stark difference between the two? Or
well, there's I would say there's even greater honor that Haman's suggesting be bestowed upon, well, himself in this instance. He doesn't know he's referring to Mordecai, because it's the robes that the king's actually worn, the horse that the king actually rode upon. I think there's like the crown that the king actually wears.
Sounds like he wants to be king.
Exactly. Like there's this whole other power element where Joseph does get into that command of power eventually. I think when we see Mordecai that's eventually going to be decked out in these things, it kind of foreshadows that Mordecai is going to have that sort of power in the kingdom like Joseph did.
So is Haman revealing his true desires here in the what he's asking the king to do for the man whom the king wants to desire? That he really, if everything was possible for him, he would want to be king?
I mean, if that's the insinuation, and if it's true that he already has this suspicion that Haman is trying to take his wife, now he's listening and going, man, there's a lot of king in that language. Is he trying to take my job and my wife? Like, is like Queen Esther going to stay Queen Esther and there's just going to be a new king now? Like that would be totally logical for the king to be thinking.
I mean, look at all the royals that was mentioned in that. Royal robes, royal crown. You know, he is as Foreman brings out, these are all things that the king has had and has used. Who else?
Yeah.
In the story has the king had and used? Esther.
Cool. That's good. That's good. Jonathan, what were you thinking of something different on the differences between the Joseph story and this when it comes to?
No, I set Raleigh up for that.
I just want to circle back.
No,
and just
it's that he wants to become the king. It's not. I'm a sense of humility under Pharaoh. I'm going to be the king of Persia. I want your robe. I want your horse. I want your chariot. I want to be you. And I think John Levinson or Fox brings this out that at this time it was well known in history that there was a lot of times just for the safety of the actual king, you'd have a fake king, a replacement king. And you would actually dress them in the king's crown and the robe and put him on a horse so that when the enemy would come out, they would kill him and not the real king.
Right. Padme Amidala.
I started to say, I'm getting Phantom Menace vibes here.
Okay, I don't know what that means, but...
I love it.
But my point being is, the funny thing is exactly what happens. He's the one that either gets impaled or gets hung on the gallows because he wants to be the king. Now, by the way, I don't think King Ahasuerus, I don't think the king of Persia is, I think the author's having fun to say, we see the pride and we see the non-wisdom of Haman, of even someone that deserves honor should always be below the king and not in replacement or equal to the king.
Good. That's good. Anything else on that section? Because what I'm thinking is we can finish out the chapter 10 through 14, talk about that, but then kind of take a step back and look at the whole thing since we know it is kind of the crux of the chiasm. One of the questions I have is, why is it this the center of the chiasm? What is the author trying to get us to really see? So, while you want to kick off and do...
Be happy to. Verse 10.
10 through 14.
Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, and dressed Mordecai, and led him through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall be done to the man who the king delights to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning, and with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but you will surely fall before him. While they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried to bring Haman to the feast that Esther had prepared.
Dun, dun, dun.
So good. I mean, it's so good.
So why do you think Zeresh says that your downfall is certain? Like, what does she know? Or where's that coming from? That's kind of like not, an encouraging, uplifting thing to say to your narcissist husband.
I mean, she sees the irony in all this, right?
You would think.
She sees the irony. You went over to the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows. All of a sudden, you're dressing Mordecai like a slave does for the king. You're slaving for Mordecai now, right?
Yep. Total role reversal.
And so she sees that this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In a sense.
But she says
Go ahead.
specifically, at least in the English, I don't know what the Hebrew says, but the middle of verse 13, since Mordecai is Jewish and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him because your downfall is certain. And so the question here is she saying this not just because of what's happened, but now it's because he is Jewish. Now, she knows there's the edict that the Jewish people are going to be killed. She knows that Haman's the one that brought the proclamation and used the signet ring of the king to make it happen, which can't be undone, by the way. And so the irony is, you are the one that brought the annihilation of the Jews, which would include Mordecai, but he is going to overcome you since he is Jewish. I mean, if there's any question out there, it's like, this does not make any sense at all. We have Zeresh knowing that the Jews are going to be killed by Haman, but now Haman's going to be killed by the Jews, at least representative Mordecai. By the way, which goes against opposite of what she just did in chapter 5, which she's the one that said, let's do the poll. She's the one that said, let's kill him on the pole. Now it's like, well, you're going to die on this pole. She doesn't say that, but you're going to be one that. So I just think there's something here. And then go to what Wally said 2 weeks ago, which was, I know he was quoting Foreman, but I did a deep dive on this, including Foreman.
Glad I spurred you to study, John.
No, so this word Jew, the word Jew here is very special because it's not used. It's only used in 2 books of the Tanakh, and that's Esther and that's 2 Kings. And it specifically means, at least arguably with Foreman, what's the word, Wally? It's not Yehud.
Yahudim.
Is it Judean, basically?
Yeah. Yahudim. It's the plural of Yahudah.
Which is, in this case, you are a person from the kingdom of Judah, which were the lower 2 tribes. The lower 2 tribes of Judah were made up of whom? I have to do a Wally thing. And that's Judah and Benjamin. And we take ourselves all the way back to Genesis. I know that's chapter 7, but we're going to take ourselves all the way back to the Joseph story about Judah and Benjamin and what Joseph was doing to stir the pot. And I just think it's really, really cool here that he uses that because he's Jewish, which is what King just called him. You're a Jew. You're one from the kingdom of Judah. Now you are, Zeresh is saying he is from the kingdom of Judah, and you're going to die. Or you're not going to overtake him.
And we know, like, the fact that all of a sudden in this chapter, the Jew follows Mordecai twice, like, and it did not before.
That's right.
We've got to key on that there's a lot going on.
All of a sudden, Jewishness has become prominent in the story. And I've just thought about this too. Zeresh is saying that this Jew is going to destroy you. And I don't know how much she would know about the history between the Jewish people and the Amalekites. I don't know. But
she doesn't even have to know that. She just
that's my point.
Can be savvy. She can be savvy and go, you just outed yourself. Remember, your whole thing was, it's too petty for me to kill Mordecai. So, what do you do when you can't kill one person? You kill,
But I find it very interesting that in chapter 17 of Exodus, where we have the hostility between the Amalekites and the Israel nation start to take effect when they're fleeing out and the Amalekites attack from behind to kill the stragglers and things like that. God tells Moses very specifically, he says in verse 14, the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. So here we're seeing, hey, there's a reality. If he's Jewish and you're an Amalekite, then the promises of God are going to play out in your life right here now, that you're done. And and your relation to Agag, I don't know if there's any more. This is because we know that his sons are going to, spoiler alert, his sons are going to be killed too, right? That the king gives Haman and his sons over to Mordecai and Esther to hang on the gallows.
So you think Zeresh knew that scripture?
I don't know, but maybe
the writer knows.
The writer knows that maybe the writer is putting these words of this prophecy to this promise, to this commandment that God is telling. I mean, he doesn't tell Moses to write down a lot of things. He told him to write down the law, right?
Right.
But here he says, write this down, Moses, that the Amalekites are dead meat.
Right.
And I think the writer is using the words of Zeresh to reinforce this promise that the Amalekites going to be demolished, is going to be destroyed, there's going to be no more because of the Jewish people.
And that's a pretty big deal. I could see it being where a person doesn't know any of the Hebrew scripture, but they heard that there's this weird thing of like, eventually the prophecy that the Amalekites are going to be totally destroyed. I could see how that would actually be pretty well known, possibly. What else, guys? There's whether it's the last section or more meta, the entire chapter, what themes and what do we need to see here in possibly the most important part of the entire book, because it is the center. Go back to my other question. Why this chapter? What is the author or God through the author shining a light on that we need to get?
It's the $1 million question. And it's like, why do we have so many references back to Joseph? And going to what Wally just said about the Amalekites and then Saul's refusal to do what he's supposed to have done. But, what God, Yahweh told Moses what would happen, and which does happen. There's so many things moving on around here. And then you're going to have in the next chapter this replay of the Judah story in Esther's mouth to the king. I don't know that I've put my fingers around it. And then to go what Wally started with, I think last episode was, what meta do we have to the New Testament? If we believe that Yahweh is the same as he is yesterday, today, and tomorrow, then there's always this foreshadowing of what the Messiah will be bringing with Christ on the tree. So we have tree imagery going on. And so I don't know that I have an answer, Timmy, but I do think it has to do with, Foreman talks a lot about this being about wisdom and memory. And so I think there's something going on here, especially how Esther is going to be transformed in this whole process.
So for you, then, it's about the pivot point is kind of her transformation happening kind of in real time in chapter 6, or at least that's part of it, right?
Yeah, but I think you're going to see her transformation as she's speaking to the king in 7 and 8. But to go to the point of, why is this the climax? Why is this the center of the chiasm? You have God's person or representative of the Jewish people, the kingdom of Judah, sitting high on a horse, being proclaimed with honor. It's where wisdom overcomes. And if you look at Joseph, which I won't go into today too much, but if you look at the early writings about Joseph, one of the things, other than just being greatly handsome and humble, it is his wisdom. That's why he never gave in to Potiphar's wife. He was tempted. He was never tempted, according to the early Jewish writers, is because he saw wisdom. And the wisdom was more beautiful than Potiphar's wife. And so I think there's something going on with wisdom here, of wisdom reigning over the evil and the raw of what Haman was doing.
That's good. That's good.
As I think about this meta narrative, as we'll call it, I think about God's promise to Abraham is being fulfilled even through Esther. God's promise to Abraham was what? That I'm going to make you a great nation, and through you all the nations will be blessed, and those that bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be. And here we're seeing God protecting his promise, because as I had Dr. George Martin taught the book of Jeremiah, and he kept repeating the same phrase over and over again. He said, God is raising up, God through the Jewish people is not building a nation, but sending a redeemer. It's not nation building, but redeemer sending. And here we have another threat to the Jewish nation for God not being able to fulfill the promise of sending the one through the Jewish people through which the world will be saved. And here is God protecting and providentially entering into this situation to make sure that his promise is kept, his covenant with Abraham is kept. And I see that we just see that God is working in this situation to ensure that his promises will be fulfilled.
And you see shadows of that in story after story in the Old Testament, right? And it's all like forecasting what's going to happen in the New Testament.
You have threat of barrenness that will prevent this lineage to happen, this Redeemer to come that was promised back in Genesis 3:15. You have all these threats to the Jewish people. You have famine, the story of Joseph, right? The story of Joseph is God working in the sinful acts of what's supposed to be holy people or that know him, sinful acts to bring about the redemption, the salvation of his promise and his people.
I think our tendency is still to go straight to personal things like, downfall of pride. That's all in here. But that's how the Jewish people would still hear this today is, no, this is much bigger. This is about a people that God has a covenant with, that he is protecting, and which, I think we have to be careful because in some, especially evangelical circles today, they'll take stories like Esther and other parts of scripture and say, that is why almost no matter what the secular state of Israel does today, for the most part, it's good. We're going to back them. We're going to back them up no matter what, which I think is a misinterpretation of, first of all, what the nation or what the group of Jews means. It's not just
it's not a state.
It's not a secular state.
There's a difference.
Exactly. There's a difference. And so if that theology takes us away from where we can't call balls and strikes and say that was good, and actually that was way over the line, then that's a problem, I think.
I love verse 14. I mean, this would make a great play, like a Broadway play.
It is, Wally. I mean, it's called a farcical comedy, but go on.
But in 14, he says, while they were yet talking, the king's eunuch arrived to hurry to bring Haman to the feast that Esther had prepared. And so, it sort of reminds me of the first part of the book of Job in chapter 1, where, the servants come and tell, hey, the Sabians have come and they've destroyed, and a storm has, and then he tells them that, and then another servant comes in right after the first servant and says, hey, there was a great wind and all your kids were in the house and it all blew away. Just one servant after another comes in and tells them all these things. And I'm just thinking about this as a stage play, as he's having this discussion with his wife about the downfall of himself and the rising of Mordecai as a Jew. All of a sudden, we see the eunuchs coming to bring him
to his death,
to the second feast.
Well, It takes 24 hours for his entire life to fall apart. He goes to the king late at night, and the king's like, okay, you're going to do whatever you just said for Mordecai the Jew. And he's like, oh, crap. So then he has to do all of that in the morning, comes back to his wife, and is ranting. He's like, oh, my gosh. And then all of a sudden at the banquet, and the banquet's going to be his ultimate downfall in the end, as we're going to see in chapter 7 next week. And so less than 24 hours, he is done.
That's a pretty fast, that's an I see dead people moment. Right? Like that's like pretty fast turnaround.
But it's not just his wife that says this thing. It says all his wise men and his wife said to him that this is not going to end well for you. I mean, they all see now there's something else behind. You might have a signet ring, but there's something else that is more powerful at work in this situation that you're not going to be able to overcome.
I love that. Jonathan, I think one of the theologians, have you been reading Michael Fox some?
I did.
What does he call it? A theology of possibility, I think is what he calls it. And it's this idea that the author here is being incredibly deliberate by not mentioning God. It actually does the exact opposite of what it looks like, and I know some commentators will be like, nope, totally secular book, but no, I don't think that a person that says that is not understanding the brilliance of this. Is it makes you go, wait, where's God? Because clearly something else is going on here. And it actually puts the focus more on God. It took the Greeks later on, I think, to mess it up with Esther 2.0. They're like, no.
We got to clarify.
We're going to spell it all out for you. They make Esther weak. I think Esther chickens out in the first banquet in the Greek Septuagint version. And so they fix everything, when I think Esther 1.0 is brilliant for that reason.
I agree.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love that chapter. And the next one, I feel the momentum just keeps going, right? Because you begin to see the ultimate downfall of one person and what it looks like for another person to rise. I hope you'll join us next week. It should be a good one. Have a great week, everyone.